The golden morning sun spilled across the Serengeti, washing the endless grasslands in hues of amber and light. The air shimmered with heat and the faint hum of insects, a sound as ancient as the land itself. A herd of impalas moved gracefully across the plains, their slender legs gliding over the grass, ears flicking at every whisper of the wind. Among them was a mother impala with two tiny fawns barely a few weeks old, fragile, curious, and still learning to walk in rhythm with their mother's heartbeat. Their world was small, the rustle of the grass, the shadow of their mother, and the warmth of the sun. They didn't know that danger watched from the tall grass not far away. A lioness named Amara crouched low, her golden eyes fixed on the herd. Hunger burned in her belly. It had been 3 days since she last tasted a meal. Her ribs showed faintly beneath her tawny coat, and her paws trembled with both exhaustion and instinct. But Amara was no ordinary hunter. She was a mother, too. Weeks earlier, she had lost her own cubs to a drought that had taken the weak and young alike. The memory of their tiny faces haunted her with every setting sun. Still, nature's laws were merciless. Hunger didn't wait for grief. As the herd grazed, one of the fawns strayed slightly, chasing a fluttering butterfly. The mother impala turned her head sharply, calling softly, but the fawn had already wandered too far. Amara saw her chance, muscles coiled, tail flicking once. She sprang forward like lightning through the grass. The herd exploded in panic, hooves drumming the earth like thunder. Dust rose, wings flapped, and cries echoed. Amara lunged, but in that same moment, the mother impala turned and leaped toward her fawn, placing herself between the predator and her child. The impact was swift, brutal, and tragic. In one heartbeat, the great law of the savannah unfolded. The hunter and the hunted, bound by fate. When the dust cleared, the mother impala lay still, her body shielded, her young ones from harm until the very last breath. Amara stood over her, panting heavily, her claws sunk in the earth, eyes flickering between hunger and hesitation. She should have fed. Instinct demanded it, but something in the sight of the trembling fawn stopped her cold. The two little fawns pressed themselves close to their mother's body, bleating softly, nudging her side, not understanding why she wouldn't move. Their cries echoed through a quiet field, piercing something deep inside the lioness's heart. She took a step forward, then another, lowering her head to sniff them. The scent of innocence, of life untouched by malice, filled her senses. For a moment, Amara saw not prey, but her lost cubs. The savannah wind carried no mercy, only silence. The lioness's jaws opened slightly, and the world seemed to hold its breath. But instead of a killing bite, she let out a soft growl, low and trembling, the kind a lioness uses to comfort her young. The fawns froze, eyes wide, but when she lay down beside them, curling her massive body protectively around their trembling forms, something extraordinary happened. The predators circling above in the sky, the vultures that had begun to descend, drifted away. That night, under the pale wash of moonlight, the lioness stayed beside the lifeless body of the impala mother. The fawns nestled against her warm belly, too young to understand the miracle of their survival. Amara didn't sleep. Her eyes reflected the moon like two small pools of gold, glimmering with both pain and purpose. The wild had taken her cubs, but had somehow returned to her a reason to live. By dawn, the scavengers had come. Hyenas laughed from a distance, their shadows long and hungry. But when they saw Amara rise to her full height, teeth bared, and heard the roar that tore from her throat, a sound that split the morning, they backed away. That roar was more than a threat. It was a promise. The lioness had made her choice. The fawns were hers now. Word of the strange event spread among the nearby ranger outposts. Wildlife photographer David Kahn, who had been tracking the lioness for weeks, witnessed the scene through his binoculars and couldn't believe his eyes. A lioness guarding two fawns as if they were her cubs? It defied nature. He whispered into his radio, his voice trembling. "You're not going to believe this, she's protecting them." For the next few days, David followed from a distance, documenting the impossible bond that was unfolding before him. The fawns began to trust their new guardian, following her everywhere. When Amara hunted, she no longer targeted impalas. Instead, she turned her focus towards smaller prey, hares, warthogs, anything that would remind her of her adopted young. When they stumbled or cried, she licked their heads gently. When they wandered too far, she growled softly, just as she once did with her cubs. Nature, for once, seemed to pause and watch its own rules being rewritten. And yet, deep within that same wilderness, the bounds of life never stayed still for long. Something darker was waiting beyond the horizon, a pride of rival lions led by a dominant male returning from exile. To them, the sight of a lioness caring for prey was not a miracle. It was madness, but that, as the rangers would soon learn, was only the beginning of what would shock the entire world. 3 days had passed since Amara had taken the 2 fawns under her protection. The mornings had grown cooler, and the scent of rain drifted faintly across the air, signaling the approaching change of season. Amara had not eaten properly since the day she met them. Every time hunger clawed at her stomach, she pushed it down, unwilling to hunt anything that reminded her of the fragile creatures now nestled at her side. To the untrained eye, she looked thinner, weaker, but in her heart, something fierce was reigniting. She was living not for survival now, but for them. The fawns had begun to follow her everywhere, their small hooves barely making a sound against the earth. They mimicked her movements clumsily, trying to pounce on grasshoppers or crouch like she did in grass, unaware that their mimicry was both adorable and tragic. When she rested, they pressed close against her body, seeking warmth and a heartbeat that told them they were safe. Sometimes, Amara would close her eyes and imagine her lost cubs in their place. Their tiny roars, the way they used to play with her tail. The illusion brought comfort, but also pain so deep it almost broke her spirit. But out there, beyond the safety of her little clearing, something was shifting. The land was restless. Tracks in the dirt told a silent story, massive paw prints, fresh and heavy. A rival pride had returned, led by a lion named Kano, a huge, scarred male with mane as dark as the storm clouds gathering above. Once, long ago, Kano had been part of Amara's pride, but after a brutal fight with her mate over territory, he was driven out, exiled into the arid north where few lions survived. Now, leaner and meaner, he was back, with vengeance smoldering in his golden eyes. Amara sensed their presence before she saw them. Her ears flicked, her muscles tensed. The air carried the unmistakable musk of lions, many lions. Her heart pounded. She rose quietly, pushing the fawns toward a patch of dense bush. "Stay," her low growl seemed to say. They didn't understand her words, but they felt her fear. Their small bodies trembled as they obeyed, pressing into the shadows. From the ridge ahead, the first lioness of Kano's pride appeared, her eyes sharp and suspicious. Then came another, and finally, emerging like a storm himself, came Kano. His mane glowed bronze in the fading sunlight, his muscles rippling with power. His roar shattered the stillness, a sound that rolled across the plains and made the ground itself quiver. The fawns froze, ears flat against their heads. Amara stepped forward. She knew what that roar meant. This was no casual encounter. It was a claim. Kano was announcing his dominance, demanding submission. But Amara had something more precious than her life now. She had 2 tiny souls who depended on her. She stood her ground, tail flicking, eyes blazing. Kano's amber gaze narrowed as he spotted movement behind her, the faint silhouettes of the fawns. He tilted his head, confused. Then his nostrils flared, and a low growl rumbled through his chest. He stepped closer, lips curling. "Prey," his instincts asked, "or madness?" The lionesses behind him whispered growls of disbelief. One of them, older and scarred, hissed, "She's protecting them." Amara didn't move. Every instinct screamed at her to back down, to run, to surrender, but she didn't. She lowered herself between the fawns and the approaching male, her body a living shield. The fawns whimpered softly, pressing against her legs. Kano snarled, his patience thinning. He lunged forward slightly, testing her courage. To his surprise, Amara roared, a thunderous, bone-deep sound that cracked the silence like lightning. It wasn't the roar of dominance, nor threat. It was the roar of a mother. The pride hesitated. Even Kano froze for a heartbeat, startled by her defiance. High above, unseen by the lions, David Kahn watched through his long camera lens, his hands shaking. "My God," he whispered. "She's challenging him." The drama unfolding before him was unlike anything captured in wildlife history. The predator, defying nature itself, standing against her own kind, for the sake of two orphans who were supposed to be her prey. The tension built like a storm about to break. The fawns, terrified but obedient, stayed behind her, peering out from the grass. Kano growled again, deeper this time, his mane bristling. Then, in a sudden blur of motion, he charged. The world erupted. Dust flew, claws tore the earth, and the air filled with snarls and roars. Amara met his charge head-on, her claws flashing like fire, her body striking as with the force of fury born from love. They clashed, tumbled, bit, and roared. Two titans locked in a war neither truly wanted, but both were bound to fight. For several agonizing seconds, the Savannah seemed to stop breathing. Then, with a massive swipe, Kano sent Amara sprawling. She hit the ground hard, gasping, blood streaking her flank. He advanced, ready to deliver the final blow, but then he saw them. The two fawns had not run. They stood trembling beside her, bleeding desperately, their eyes wide with terror and loyalty. They didn't flee, though they easily could have. They stayed by her, pressing against her wounded body as if to protect her in return. And something strange, passed over Kano's face. His snarl faltered. His eyes softened for the briefest moment, as if some buried memory flickered inside him. He turned his head slightly, his breath heavy, his tail twitching. The lionesses behind him waited for his command, but none came. After a long, tense silence, Kano growled low and stepped back. His gaze lingered on the strange trio, the predator and her prey bound together by something that had no place in the wild. Then he turned, motioning to his pride. One by one, they melted into the grass, leaving Amara and the fawn alive. David lowered his camera, tears in his eyes. He spared them, he whispered in disbelief. He actually spared them. Amara lay still for a while, her sides heaving, blood staining her golden fur. The fawns nuzzled her face, bleeding softly. Slowly, painfully, she lifted her head. The storm clouds above finally broke, and rain began to fall in slow, gentle drops, washing the dust and blood from her body, cooling the earth around her. As the first drops touched her face, she closed her eyes and exhaled, long and deep. The Savannah had witnessed something extraordinary that day, a mother's love that defied the very laws of nature, and a king's mercy born from confusion and awe. But though peace had returned for a moment, danger in the wild was never far away. The rain would bring life back to land, and with it, new predators, new hunger, and new trials that would once again test the lioness and her adopted children. For now, though, under the rain and fading thunder, they slept together, alive and safe, if only for a while. The rains continued for days, drenching the savannah in a silvery sheen, turning the dusty plains into soft mud that smelled of earth, grass, and renewal. For the first time in weeks, Amara felt a strange serenity. The fawns, now slightly more confident, pranced awkwardly around her, splashing in puddles, chasing droplets from the sky with tiny hooves that left prints beside the huge paw marks of their guardian. Their laughter-like bleats mingled with the soft patter of rain, creating a harmony that seemed almost sacred. In these moments, Amara remembered what it was like to raise her own cubs, how every stumble, every cry, every heartbeat had mattered so much. But this was different. She was raising creatures not of her species, a challenge of instinct of heart, and a survival against everything the wild demanded. Hunger remained a constant gnawing presence. Even with the rains bringing new life to the plains, frogs hopping into pools, insects swarming, and small rodents scurrying under the cover grass, Amara's restraint was tested every day. She had learned to hunt smaller prey, avoiding impalas and gazelles, so as not to betray the trust of the two fawns who now relied entirely on her. Each hunt became a delicate dance. She would stalk hares or wild birds, killing only enough to feed herself and to ensure the fawns saw no bloodshed of their own kind. She had to balance the savage instincts within her with the tender, protective love she now felt. Every time she caught a hare, she nudged it far from the fawns, ate discreetly, and returned to them with a soft nuzzle and the reassuring rumble of her throat. The fawns began to recognize danger on their own, mimicking Amara's behavior. They froze when a snake slithered by, crouched when predator approached from the sky, and followed Amara into the shadows whenever unfamiliar sounds filled the rain-soaked grass. It was remarkable. In days, a lioness had taught prey animals lessons that only mothers of their kind could hope to pass on. Yet the savannah was unforgiving. Not all creatures recognized her strange guardianship, and whispers of death hid in the tall grass. One evening, as the rain tapered to a drizzle and the orange-pink sunset reflected off the wet plains, a familiar scent reached Amara's sensitive nose. Kano. She froze, muscles taut, tail flicking. This time, however, he came alone, silent, cautious, and watched from a distance. The fawns pressed themselves against her belly, sensing that something was different. Kano's approach wasn't aggressive. It was almost curious. He observed her, observed the little creature she had claimed as her own, and let out a low rumble, not a roar. Amara understood immediately. This was a test, not of strength, but a morality of choices she had made. In nature, the weak were consumed, the orphan left to die, and the predator hunted without hesitation. Yet she had chosen love over instinct, mercy over hunger, protection over survival. Kano, the king of her past and her rival, had returned to judge her actions. Days passed in quiet tension. Amara moved with the fawns through the wet plains, teaching them to hide, to be still, to listen to the whisper of danger in the wind. She introduced them to shallow waterholes, letting them lap cautiously, teaching them the rhythm of the savannah's life cycles. She hunted only when necessary, and she always returned to them, the rain washing away the traces of her predatory nature. Slowly, the fawns began to flourish, their legs growing stronger, their curiosity sharpening, and their trust in Amara deepening. Yet the shadow of Kano remained, a silent reminder that nature's laws were not bent lightly. One fateful morning, as a soft fog enveloped the plains and the first birds began to stir, a challenge arrived far more dangerous than a rival lion. A pack of hyenas, emboldened by the rains that had made the terrain slippery and disorienting, descended upon the trio. Their cackles echoed through the fog, a symphony of menace. Amara immediately positioned herself between them and the fawns, her body low, ears flattened, eyes flashing gold in the mist. The hyenas circled, clever and vicious, looking for a weakness, any sign of hesitation. Amara realized something terrifying. The fawns, though growing stronger, were not fast enough to outrun these predators. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to abandon them for her own survival. But she didn't. Instead, she roared, a sound so deep and fierce that the mist seemed to vibrate. She struck out, clawing and biting, her muscles moving with precision and brutality of a seasoned hunter. Each time a hyena lunged, she redirected it, forcing them to retreat temporarily. But there were too many. Her stamina began to falter, her body slick with rain and mud, and her mind screamed for solution. Then, unexpectedly, Kano appeared. Without a sound, without hesitation, he joined the fray, striking at the hyenas with the ferocity of a lion who had once ruled these plains. Together, Amara and Kano fought side by side, two predators united not by love, but by circumstance. The hyenas, sensing the shift in dominance and power, retreated into the fog, leaving the wet grass behind, damp and trampled. The fawns, shaking but unharmed, watched from the safety of the shadows. They had witnessed their guardian and a powerful lion working in tandem, and somehow understood the lesson. Strength was not always measured in teeth and claws. It was measured in courage, in protection, and in the willingness to stand against impossible odds for those you love. As the fog lifted and the sun began to pierce through clouds, Amara allowed herself a rare moment of rest. Kano, standing a short distance away, met her gaze. Neither spoke, yet the understanding passed silently between them. She was no longer just a lioness. She was a mother in a way nature had never intended, a guardian who had rewritten the rules of survival. The fawns approached, nuzzling her flanks, and for a fleeting moment, all three felt the fragile peace of family amidst the harsh realities of the wild. But peace, as the savannah had taught her time and again, was always temporary. The rains would fade, the sun would scorch the plains, and new dangers would arrive. Amara's strength would be tested further, and the choices she made now would determine whether her unusual family survived the unforgiving laws of nature or became just another story whispered among the grass and wind. In that quiet, wet morning, beneath the slowly clearing sky, the lioness allowed herself to imagine a future where they could thrive. The fawns, growing braver each day, would one day learn the lesson she imparted. Courage, trust, and the strange miracle that love can flourish even in the teeth of survival. Yet deep inside, she knew that the greatest test was still to come, one that would challenge everything she had learned about mercy, instinct, and the bond between predator and prey. The sun rose in a crimson blaze over the Serengeti, casting long shadows across the grasslands. The fawns, now a few weeks stronger, leaped through puddles left by the retreating rains, their laughter-like bleats echoing across the empty plains. Amara followed closely, her massive paws leaving impressions in the wet earth, a gentle reminder of her silent presence. She had taught them how to pause when danger was near, how to detect the slightest rustle in the grass, and how to follow instinct tempered by caution. Yet, with each passing day, the tug-of-war within her grew stronger. Hunger whispered seductively at the edges of her mind, instincts she had suppressed since finding them demanding satisfaction. Each time she saw a young impala grazing alone, a flash of memory stirred within her, a reminder that she was still a predator. The fawns, unaware of her inner struggle, bounded ahead, chasing a rabbit that darted through the grass. Amara's eyes followed it with precision, muscles coiling, body ready to strike. But then she paused, inhaling deeply, reminding herself of the tiny lives depending on her restraint. She released a low, rumbling growl, not of threat, but of warning and self-command. The rabbit slipped away, safe, while fawns squealed in delight at the chase they had imagined. Yet the Serengeti had its own plans. From the distant hills came a familiar scent of another predator, this time a solitary leopard, lithe, silent, and deadly. Its spotted coat blended seamlessly with the dappling light of the trees and bushes, and its golden eyes reflected hunger sharper than Amara's own. She froze, sensing the danger before it was fully revealed. The fawns, still unaware of the stealthy presence, continued their playful bounding, utterly oblivious. Amara stepped between them, and the leopard, tail low, growled trembling in her throat. The leopard, cautious but intrigued, watched her with predatory calculation. It circled slowly, testing, weighing her strength against a potential prize. Amara's body tensed, every muscle ready to defend, but she knew that this confrontation could not escalate into a full fight. Any injury could endanger her tiny wards. The tension between her instincts and her maternal devotion surged like a tidal wave. The fawns huddled close, sensing the danger in ways only young prey sometimes do, ears flattened, hearts pounding. Time seemed to stretch. The leopard took a step closer, eyes gleaming, ready to strike. Amara growled, a low, threatening vibration that resonated through the earth. She struck out, swiping her massive paw near the predator's face, not to injure, but to warn. The leopard recoiled, surprised by the ferocity of a lion, defending animals that were technically her prey. Slowly, deliberately, it retreated, fading into brush as silently as it had arrived. The fawns, sensing the danger had passed, pressed their heads against Amara's warm flank, bleating softly. She nuzzled them back, her enormous head heavy against their tiny bodies. The struggle between predator and protector was not over in her mind, however. Every day required vigilance, self-control, and immeasurable love. Nature's pull toward hunting was relentless, yet her bond with these tiny creatures had become unbreakable. She realized she had not only saved them, but had changed them and herself in ways that defied instinct and the natural order. But even as she savored this fleeting moment of peace, another threat loomed, one that was not entirely external. One afternoon, a small, wounded gazelle stumbled into the clearing, its leg broken, eyes wide with fear. Amara's instinct screamed at her to hunt, to feed, to satisfy the primal urges she had fought so hard to suppress. The fawns watched her, their innocent eyes wide, trusting her judgment completely. Amara crouched, head lowered, staring at the gazelle. Hunger roared through her chest, her muscles tensing with the need to strike. Her paws twitched involuntarily, claws scraping the earth. And then she paused. She remembered the fawns, their faces pressed against her side, their small bodies relying entirely on her restraint. Slowly, she stepped back, letting the gazelle escape into the shelter of the nearby bushes. The fawns bleated in relief, rubbing against her as if to say, "Thank you," though they did not understand the depth of the sacrifice she had made. It was in moments like these that Amara understood the true meaning of motherhood, love, and courage. Survival alone was easy in the wild, but protection required patience, discipline, and a heart that could resist the ancient called instinct. Each day, each decision, became a testament to her devotion, not just to fawns, but to the strange family she had created. As the days turned into weeks, Amara began teaching the fawns more than just survival skills. She taught them where to find water, how to navigate through the long grass without being seen, and how to listen to the whispers of the wind for danger. She taught them to trust, to be bold yet careful, and most importantly, to understand that family is not only determined by species. It is defined by love and protection. But the Savannah would not allow peace to last forever. Word of her unusual behavior, predator raising, prey spread among the other animals. Smaller predators, scavengers, and even her own kind began to watch from a distance, testing her, waiting for a moment of weakness. Amara knew that the fawn's survival depended not only on her courage and restraint, but also on her ability to anticipate every threat, every sudden movement in the tall grass, every shift in the wind. One evening, as the sun dipped behind distant hills, a soft, eerie howl traveled across the plains. The fawns froze, ears twitching, and pressed closer to her. From the ridge above, a pack of jackals descended, attracted by the scent of small, defenseless animals. Amara's muscles coiled, eyes flashing with determination. She knew she had to fight not just for herself, but for the two lives that depended on her. What followed was a masterclass in strategy, an instinct tempered by love. Amara lunged, struck, and maneuvered with grace and precision, using her massive body to shield the fawns. The jackals, clever and coordinated, tried repeatedly to flank her, but she anticipated their every move. When one came too close, she swiped it with a powerful paw, sending it tumbling into the muddy ground. The fawns huddled, watching, learning, and understanding in ways that words could never convey. After what felt like hours, the jackals retreated, their cackles fading into the distance. The rain had returned, a gentle drizzle washing the mud and sweat from her fur. The fawns nuzzled her side, trembling, and she lowered her massive head to press against them, inhaling their scent and letting the rhythmic rise and fall of their tiny bodies calm her own racing heartbeat. Amara realized in that moment that her life had forever changed. She was no longer just a lioness of the wild. She was a mother, a teacher, and a guardian. Each decision, each sacrifice, each moment of restraint had forged a bond between predator and prey that transcended instinct. The fawns had grown stronger, braver, and wiser because of her. And though the Savannah would continue to challenge them, test them, and demand more than most could endure, she knew that together they could survive anything. The sun climbed high above the Serengeti, warming the glistening grass as the fawns grew bolder with each passing day. Their legs, once wobbly and uncertain, now carried them swiftly across the plains. They chased butterflies and darted after small birds, their eyes wide with curiosity and joy. Amara followed closely, her massive frame a constant, silent protector. Each time she looked at them, she was reminded that the fragile bond she had forged was as much a miracle as the rains that had nurtured the plains. Yet, with each playful leap of the fawns, a gnawing tension stirred deep within her. The wild was never forgiving, and their innocent boldness drew eyes they could not yet see. It began with a whisper on the wind, a rustling in the tall grasses, a subtle vibration that tickled Amara's sensitive ears. She froze, scanning the horizon. Her instincts screamed danger, and she pressed her body close to the ground. The fawns, unaware of the threat, continued their frolic, chasing shadows that twisted with the sunlight. Amara growled softly, warning them, but their innocent minds could not comprehend the danger hidden beyond the waving grass. She stepped forward, low and silent, urging them back toward the safety of the mud-covered clearings she had claimed as their refuge. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught her eye. A crocodile, massive and ancient, had emerged from a nearby waterhole. Its dark, scaly body glistened with water as it slithered silently toward the unsuspecting fawns. Amara's heart leapt into her throat. Her instinct screamed at her to attack, to strike, to kill. Yet there was no time for hesitation. The fawns were too close. With a powerful roar that shook the trees and the water, she leaped forward, claws extended, teeth bared. The fawns squealed in terror as Amara's massive body collided with the crocodile. Claws tore at scales, teeth snapped at jaws, and the struggle became a violent ballet of survival. The fawns huddled together, pressed against each other, eyes wide with fear. They had seen their guardian fight before, but never like this. Never against a creature so cunning, so lethal, and so utterly merciless. Amara's muscles burned, her body slick with water and mud, yet she refused to yield. Every instinct, every ounce of strength was focused on one thing: keeping them alive. For several heart-stopping moments, it seemed as though the battle would never end. The crocodile snapped and twisted, thrashing with primal fury, but Amara matched its strength with sheer determination. She bit down, clawed, and lunged, her massive body moving with precision and power. The fawns watched, trembling, understanding in a way beyond words that their lives hung by a thread. Finally, with one last surge, Amara forced the crocodile back into the waterhole. It hissed, a sound that reverberated like thunder through the clearing, then disappeared beneath the murky depths. Amara collapsed beside the fawns, panting heavily, her sides heaving, her golden fur matted with mud, water, and blood. The fawns pressed themselves against her, nuzzling her face, their tiny bodies trembling yet safe. She closed her eyes and let out a long, shuddering breath, realizing that she had survived yet another trial. And so had they. But the danger was far from over. The struggle had attracted attention. From the edge of the clearing, a pair of hyenas appeared, drawn by the scent of the fight, their yellow eyes glinting with hunger and cunning. Amara knew they would not hesitate. She rose slowly, muscles tense, eyes locked on the approaching threat. The fawns huddled behind her massive frame, ears flattened and bodies trembling. The hyenas circled, trying to find a weak point, a moment of hesitation. Amara growled, low and menacing, warning them off. They responded with high-pitched laughs, darting closer and retreating, testing her patience. Every instinct within her screamed to attack, but she had to protect the fawns first. She leaped, striking one hyena with a swipe of her paw, sending it tumbling backward. The other hesitated, reassessing the situation. It was then that Kano appeared again, silent, powerful, and commanding. With a single authoritative roar, he intimidated the hyenas, forcing them to retreat into the brush. The fawns blinked, eyes wide, as the two lions, once rivals, now united in purpose, stood side by side. Amara's chest heaved, exhaustion threatening to overwhelm her, but she pressed forward, leading the fawns to the safety of the thicket, where they could rest and recover. Once the fawns were secure, Amara allowed herself a rare moment to reflect. Each challenge had tested not only her strength but her resolve, her love, and her ability to resist the pull of instinct. She had become more than a predator. She had become a mother in the truest sense, shaping the lives of creatures who would never have survived otherwise. The fawns, growing bolder and stronger, had begun to mimic her movements, learning to hide, to observe, and to survive. Yet their curiosity, while endearing, constantly placed them in peril. As dusk fell, painting the sky in shades of crimson and violet, the fawns nestled close to her, exhausted but unharmed. Amara lay beside them, her head resting on the soft earth, eyes scanning the horizon for threats that might come in the night. She knew that every day would bring new challenges, new dangers, and new tests of her love and courage. The Serengeti was a land of beauty and brutality, and she had pledged herself to protect these two fragile lives, no matter the cost. And yet, in the quiet of the night, beneath the shimmering stars, Amara sensed that something greater was approaching, something that would not test her physical strength, nor her instinct, but the very heart and soul of the unusual family she had created. A force that would shock the Savannah and everyone who had witnessed the miracle of a predator adopting prey. The night fell with a heavy silence over the Serengeti, broken only by the distant calls of nocturnal creatures and the rustle of the grass in the gentle wind. The fawns slept close to Amara, their tiny chests rising and falling with rhythmic certainty, unaware of the storm brewing beyond the thicket. For the first time in weeks, the lioness allowed herself a moment of peace. Her golden eyes scanned the horizon, reflecting the pale light of the crescent moon. But instinct told her that this calm was temporary. Something extraordinary, something perilous, was about to arrive. Hours later, just as the first hints of dawn painted the sky in pink and orange streaks, a strange sound echoed across the plains. It was neither roar nor howl, but a low, persistent tremor like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The fawns stirred, sensing a vibration they did not understand. Amara's ears pricked, muscles tensing as her instinct surged. She stepped forward, positioning herself between the fawns and the open plains. From the distance, she saw a herd of buffalo approaching. But something was wrong. Their movement was frantic, disordered, as if driven by a force they could not see or escape. Suddenly, a terrifying realization struck her. A wildfire, carried by the dry winds from a distant grassland, was racing toward the plains. Flames licked the sky, smoke billowed like dark clouds, and the smell of burning grass filled the air. The Serengeti was alive with panic. Animals scattered, hooves pounding against the earth, birds screaming as they took flight. Amara's heart pounded in rhythm with the chaos. The fawns huddled behind her, trembling, terrified of the roaring heat and smoke. Amara knew that this was no ordinary test. Fire in the wild was a merciless force, consuming everything in its path, sparing neither predator nor prey. She had faced predators, crocodiles, hyenas, and even the rival Kano, but this was something beyond strength, cunning, or strategy. It demanded instinct, courage, and impossible decision-making. Every step she took would decide life or death for the two tiny creatures who had come to rely on her. She led them away from the approaching flames, using knowledge of the land she had gained from weeks of survival. She guided them through narrow ravines, over shallow streams, and along hidden paths where smoke drifted but the fire could not reach. The fawns struggled to keep up, their tiny legs trembling from exhaustion and fear. Amara's massive paws pounded the earth tirelessly, moving faster than any predator should have been able to sustain. She growled encouragement, her deep rumble vibrating against the tiny bodies pressed against her side. But as they approached a narrow cliffside, disaster struck. A portion of the ground, weakened by the fire and rain that had come before, gave way. The fawns teetered dangerously close to the edge, their small hooves slipping on loose soil. One cried out, a piercing sound of panic that echoed across the ravine. Amara lunged, catching it with her massive paw just before it could fall. She held it tightly against her chest, breast shaking, heart pounding. The second fawn followed, guided by her low rumble, trembling but safe in her shadow. From the cliff's edge, Amara could see the full scale of the fire. It stretched for miles, a river of flames consuming grasslands and trees, sending animals fleeing in terror. Smoke choked the air, making each breath a challenge. Yet she pressed onward, guiding the fawns to a narrow valley that had been spared by the fire's path. Here, water pooled from recent rains, grass still green and soft. It was a refuge, but temporary. The fawns huddled together, ears pressed flat, eyes wide with fear, while Amara circled them protectively, listening for any sound of approaching danger. And then she saw him. Kano, the rival lion, once her adversary, now appeared at the edge of the valley. But this time, he was not alone. He had arrived not to challenge her, but to offer an unspoken alliance. He seemed to understand, as all predators must in moments of true peril, that some forces were bigger than pride or rivalry. Together, they stood silently, two massive lions, flanking the fawns against the unstoppable wildfire. The days that followed tested Amara like never before. Smoke stung her eyes, heat scorched her fur, and the fawns struggled to keep pace with the frantic movement through the shrinking patches of safe ground. She hunted only enough to keep herself fed, relying on the alliance with Kano to help protect against scavengers and opportunistic predators drawn by the chaos. The fawns learned to hide, to move quietly, to follow instinct guided by love. And slowly, incredibly, they survived, Finally, after hours that felt like weeks, the fire passed. Blackened grass and charred trees marked the land, but Amara and the fawns emerged alive, exhausted but triumphant. She collapsed beside them, her body slick with sweat and soot, breathing hard but filled with an overwhelming sense of relief. The fawns nuzzled her face, their trust and gratitude radiating in ways that no predator could have ever anticipated. It was then that the miracle became clear. In the middle of the scorched plains, a tiny patch of grass had survived, a natural oasis untouched by the fire. Here, the fawns had graze, play, and grow stronger under Amara's watchful eyes. Nature had tested them, tore apart the ordinary rules of survival, yet somehow rewarded the courage, restraint, and love of one extraordinary lioness. As dawn broke over the blackened earth, Amara looked at the fawns, alive, safe, and thriving, and realized something profound. She had faced hunger, predators, rivals, and even the relentless fury of fire. She had resisted instinct and acted with love. And in doing so, she had rewritten the story of survival itself. The fawns were hers not by law, not by nature, but by the extraordinary power of devotion. Little did anyone know, though, that the greatest challenge was still ahead. The wild, ever merciless and unpredictable, had more lessons to teach. Lessons of growth, courage, and impossible choices. Weeks passed, and the scorched plains slowly began to heal. Green shoots pushed through blackened earth. Streams swelled with recent rains, and the Serengeti's symphony of life returned. The fawns, now stronger, more confident, and aware of the dangers around them, began exploring further from Amara's side. They bounded to the tall grass, chasing insects, and leaping over fallen branches, their legs long and steady. Yet every time they strayed too far, Amara's deep rumble of warning brought them back, reminding them the fragile boundary between safety and peril. Her instincts, though tamed by love, were still sharp, vigilant, and ever watchful. Kano remained nearby, silently observing. The bond between the two lions had evolved into a mutual understanding, forged by shared survival against the wildfire and the perils of the wild. He no longer challenged her authority. Instead, he became a silent guardian, lending strength when threats approached. Their alliance was unspoken but undeniable. Together, they patrolled the territory, ensuring that no predator, no opportunistic scavenger, and no environmental danger would claim the fawns. But the Serengeti is never without challenge. One morning, as the fawns ventured toward a shallow river, the water reflecting the golden sunrise, a shadow passed above. A martial eagle, massive and predatory, swooped toward the fawns, talons extended. Amara sprang into action, her powerful legs propelling her forward with the grace and speed of a creature born to hunt. She leapt, landing between the eagle and the fawns just as the bird descended, its claws inches from the younger of the two. With a fearsome roar and a swipe of her massive paw, she forced it to retreat. The fawns, trembling but unharmed, pressed against her side, understanding in ways words could never convey that their lives depended on her vigilance. Later that day, a more insidious threat emerged. A rogue male lion, attracted by the scent of young prey and the distant wildfire smoke, approached the territory. His golden mane glistened in the sun, muscles rippling with predatory power. Amara sensed him immediately, tensing, eyes narrowing, tail flicking in warning. The fawns, sensing her alertness, stayed close, trusting her entirely. Kano appeared, silent as ever, and together the two lions confronted the intruder. The battle that ensued was fierce. Amara, fueled not only by instinct but by maternal love, struck with precision, her claws tearing at the earth and the rival lion. Kano joined in, powerful and relentless, and together they forced the intruder back, establishing dominance through a combination of strategy, raw strength, and unyielding courage. The fawns, hiding nearby, learned again the vital lesson that courage is not measured by size but by resolve, protection, and loyalty. As the day faded into twilight, the fawns began to venture farther, testing the limits of their strength and awareness. Amara allowed them, watching with a mixture of pride and anxiety. Each step they took was a step toward independence, a step toward learning the harsh laws of the wild. But under her guidance, they were prepared in ways most prey animals never were. She taught them not only to hide and flee, but to read the movements of predators, the shifting patterns of the wind, and the subtle signals of danger. It was during one of these explorations that the fawns encountered their first real test of cunning. A hidden pit, covered with loose earth and camouflaged by grass, threatened to trap the smaller of the two. Amara, sensing the danger from a distance, let out a warning growl. The fawn froze, its hooves inches from the edge. With a burst of speed, Amara arrived, nudging it back to safety, teaching in that moment a lesson of awareness, patience, and trust. Every near miss, every scare was a lesson they absorbed, growing not just stronger but wiser. By now, the fawns had begun to display a confidence that was astonishing. They ran alongside Amara during hunts, mimicking her movements, crouching in the tall grass, and retreating when danger approached. They were learning resilience, courage, and the extraordinary bond that had formed between predator and prey. Yet Amara understood that the ultimate trial was yet to come. The survival of these young creatures in a world that would never forgive weakness, a world where love alone could not shield them. That trial arrived one fateful evening. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains, and the air carried an ominous stillness. From the distance, the roar of a lion echoed, a roar different from Kano's, one heavy with power and hunger, a roar that promised confrontation. A massive male, dominant and territorial, had entered their land. Amara's muscles tense, her instincts sharpening, heart racing with anticipation. She pressed the fawns close, growling low, warning them to stay still. Kano, silent and imposing, flanked her, ready for the coming clash. The battle that unfolded was epic. The rival male attacked with unmatched ferocity, testing both Amara and Kano, probing for weakness. Amara fought not only with claws and teeth, but with every ounce of cunning and courage she had gained over weeks of survival. Kano struck from the side, and together they drove the intruder back. The fawns watched from a safe distance, absorbing lessons of strength, strategy, and the protective power of love. When the dust settled, the fawns were safe, the intruder driven away, and the alliance between Amara and Kano stronger than ever. The Serengeti had witnessed something extraordinary, a predator defying the expected order, raising creatures of another species, teaching them courage and survival, and facing challenges that would have daunted even the strongest of lions. As night fell, Amara lay down with the fawns pressed against her, exhausted but triumphant. The stars shimmered above, a silent testament to their survival and the bond that had carried them through fire, predators, and peril. She realized in that moment that she had not only protected them but transformed the landscape of their lives, and perhaps even the rules of the wild itself. Little did anyone know, the final chapter of their story was approaching, a revelation that would shock the plains and all who bore witness to the extraordinary family that had formed against all odds. The Serengeti awoke to a golden dawn, the plains stretching endlessly under a sky painted in shades of amber and rose. Amara stirred. The fawns nestled against her side, their small bodies warm and steady. The past weeks had been a relentless test of strength, instinct, and courage. Fire, predators, floods, and rival lions had all threatened to tear apart the delicate family she'd built, but they had endured. And now, as the first light touched the grass, something remarkable emerged from the shadows of the wild. The fawns were thriving. Their legs were strong, their senses sharp, and their confidence had blossomed under her watchful guidance. They no longer trembled at the faintest rustle or flinched at every shadow. They had learned to survive, not just as prey, but as creatures of awareness, guided by a mother unlike any the wild had seen before. Amara watched them play near the shallow waterhole, their laughter-like bleats mingling with the soft trickle of the stream. Their movements were precise, deliberate, and instinctive in ways that mirrored her own. Each leap, each cautious glance, each careful step carried the lessons she had painstakingly imparted: vigilance, courage, patience, and trust. But what filled her heart most was something deeper, unquantifiable, the realization that she had nurtured not just survival, but spirit. These small lives carried a spark of resilience that transcended the natural order, a spark she had ignited and tended like a flame against the harsh winds of the Serengeti. Kano appeared silently from a brush, his dark mane glistening with dew. He had remained a steadfast ally, never encroaching upon her bond with the fawns. yet ever vigilant, his present a protective shadow over the fragile family. There was a mutual understanding between them, a recognition that their unusual alliance had altered the course of nature in this corner of the plains. Together, predator and rival had ensured the survival of creatures no one expected to endure. They observed the fawns with pride, eyes narrowing in unspoken approval at the young animal's boldness and grace. But the final, unimaginable twist of their story was yet to reveal itself. As Amara surveyed the clearing, a soft rustle from the distant grass drew her attention. At first, she tensed, expecting a predator, a threat, some force that would undo the delicate balance she had fought so hard to preserve. Instead, two figures emerged, two adult deer, their coats glistening in the morning sun, eyes wide with recognition. They were the parents of the fawns, believed to have perished in the wildfire weeks ago. Somehow, they had survived, scarred but alive, drawn by the scent and safety of their offspring. The fawns froze, eyes widening at the sight of their true parents. A complex interplay of emotions unfolded. Recognition, fear, joy, and confusion, all reflected in their trembling bodies. Amara's heart clenched, a pang of loss mingling with relief. She realized, in that extraordinary moment, that her guardianship had been temporary yet transformative. She had saved lives that were not hers by birth, altered their understanding of safety and trust, and created a bond that defied instinct and expectation. And now, the natural order sought to restore itself, gently and miraculously, as if acknowledging her extraordinary sacrifice. The reunion was tender, a scene almost sacred in its beauty. The fawns nuzzled their true parents, their trust in Amara unwavering even as they explored the familiar yet foreign comfort of family restored. The parents, cautious yet grateful, understood the role the lioness had played, the extraordinary mother who defied nature itself to protect their young. Amara stepped back, letting the reunion unfold, her chest heavy with exhaustion, pride, and a quiet sorrow. She had given them life, and now, in this miraculous twist, life returned to them fully. For a moment, the plains were silent, holding its breath as predator, prey, and family coexisted in an unprecedented harmony. Amara lay in the grass, exhausted, observing the fawns interact with their biological parents. She had fought crocodiles, rival lions, hyenas, eagles, and fire itself. She had resisted every primal urge to dominate or consume them, choosing instead the improbable path of mercy, love, and devotion. And in doing so, she had rewritten the rules of survival, not just for herself, but for the entire Serengeti. Kano approached, his massive form silhouetted against the rising sun. He nuzzled Amara lightly, an acknowledgment of shared triumph. Their alliance had changed both of them. He had seen mercy where there was no obligation, courage where survival alone could have sufficed, and love where instinct demanded predation. The bond they had forged would linger in memory and in the story whispered by the grass and wind. Together, they had witnessed a miracle born from bravery, compassion, and the defiance of nature itself. As the fawns frolicked with their parents, Amara slowly rose to her feet. She looked over the plains, the morning light bathing the land in gold, and realized that her role, though nearing its natural conclusion, had been transformative. She had become a legend in the wild, a lioness who raised prey, defied instinct, survived trials beyond imagination, and left an indelible mark on the creatures she had loved. She breathed deeply, the warm wind carrying the scent of grass, water, and life itself, and stepped back, allowing the family to move forward under protection of their own kind. In the weeks that followed, Amara remained nearby, watching from the shadows. She observed the fawns grow, thrive, and flourish with their parents, their every movement a testament to the lessons she had imparted. Yet she no longer needed to intervene. They had learned courage, trust, and resilience, not merely by surviving, but by living under the care of a guardian who had defied every expectation. Finally, one morning, as the sun broke through the clouds and the plains shimmered with life renewed, Amara walked away. The fawns, now robust and confident, watched her disappear into the distant brush, understanding instinctively that she had been the force that had shaped their destiny. The Serengeti seemed to exhale, as if acknowledging her extraordinary journey. Predators, prey, fire, and flood had all been conquered, not by strength alone, but by love. Amara's story spread silently across the plains, whispered by birds, murmured by streams, carried by the wind through the tall grass. A lioness had defied nature, rewritten the rules of survival, and created a family against all odds. And though she disappeared into the vast expanse of Serengeti, her legacy endured, not only in the lives she had saved, but in the hearts of every creature who had witnessed or would one day hear the tale of the lioness who loved beyond instinct. In the end, it was not victory over predators or dominance in the wild that defined her. It was mercy, courage, and the extraordinary bond of love. And as the fawns, once orphans, thrived under protection of their true parents, the legend of Amara, the lioness who adopted them, fought for them, and defied nature itself, was written forever into the very soul of the Serengeti.